Hi, I'm Devon2. I am the General Services Officer here at Embassy Port Moresby. Prior to working at the Embassy, I was working as a historian, so I'm here to talk about some of the historical perspective on the election that we are here watching today. I guess there's sort of 3 points that I would like to make. I think it's easy, first of all, to think that Americans electing a president is something of a foregone conclusion, but in fact, the U.S. was never intended to have a president in the first place. So we'll talk about how we got there. Second, the fact that we do have the office of the president was the result of something of a miscalculation on the part of the founders. And the third point, while it's easy to get caught up in who wins the election, I think history teaches us that more important than how elections are won is how they are lost. So let's think about the first point. Those of you who aced your history classes will know that the U.S. was never intended to have a president in the first place. Right? The first system of governing of this country was the Articles of Confederation. Under the Articles, there was no president. There was a one-house Congress, but no form of executive leadership. And really, when you think about it, that makes sense. You had a group of colonists who felt that they had just overthrown the shackles of a very sort of despotic king of England. So they did not want to recreate in their brand new nation a type of government where political power could pool dangerously in the hands of one person. So they purposely avoided creating a strong executive or any kind of executive under the Articles. However, the Articles were in place for about 10 years, and the founders realized that they had actually swung the pendulum too far. They created the office of the presidency because they learned that the Articles didn't have enough centralized power. So when the Constitutional Convention met 10 years later, 1787, Philadelphia, one thing that they created was the strong executive that they'd sought to avoid only 10 years earlier. They were still wary of having a strong central power, but what made it work this time was that they had that system of checks and balances. You had a legislative branch, a judicial branch, hopefully tethering that executive, grounding that person so they wouldn't make these sort of overarching, overly powerful decisions that they felt English monarchs had in the past. Thus, the presidency was born, and from that day forward, Americans have been having presidential elections. I would argue, though, that just as important as who wins those elections is who loses them and how. If you look back, one of the most important elections in this country was actually the election of 1800, also known as the Revolution of 1800, and it was truly revolutionary in the sense that for the first time you had a complete transfer of political parties ruling. The previous 3 elections, presidents with the same sort of political ideology had won the elections and governed the nation. In 1800, however, that changed drastically. You had Jefferson running against Adams. Jefferson won 73 electoral votes to Adams' 65, and overnight you had the transfer of an entire political system. Federalists voted out of office, Democratic Republicans in. And what's so revolutionary about that is it set this vital precedent for the peaceful transfer of power from a defeated party to the successor. You did that without guns, without rebellion. You did that through the vote. And that remains one of the cornerstones of our American political system today. So again, as you're watching the elections, think about those things. The fact that the U.S. having a president was never really in the plans at first, and that we have a president because of something of a miscalculation that was then addressed in the Constitution. And third, remember that just as important as who wins these elections is who and how they're lost. Thank you.
Cut.